So today we're going to be reviewing benchmark fractions and use this to help us compare fractions. This is going to be the first time I'm doing the video right on the screen, so I'm sorry if the handwriting is not the best. Let's start with the first one. Benchmark fractions include blank, blank, and blank. Well, I remember from yesterday that we said benchmark fractions include 0, 1/2, and 1. Those are our three major benchmarks. The purpose of benchmark fractions are to help you assess the reasonableness of your answer, just like when you estimated the quotients. They can also help you, like we said yesterday, compare fractions. So I'm going to write compare on this next line. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So we're going to be starting with guided learning part A. Here we see that we have 1/4 and we're comparing it to 5/6. We want to think of our benchmark fractions. I'm going to write them up here. 0, 1/2, and 1. See which one each fraction is closer to. 1/4, well, I'm going to draw that out here to help me. I'm going to split my bar model into 4 parts, shade one of those parts. Well, I can see that the halfway point would be right here. And I see that 1/4 is actually exactly halfway between 0 and 1/2. So whichever one I end up choosing is going to be right. I have the choice to say 1/4 is closer to 0 or 1/4 is closer to 1 or 1/2. I'm going to say that 1/4 is closer to 0 for this one, but if you chose 1/2, that's fine. Now let's do 5/6. We have our bar model, break it up into 6 equal parts. And now we're going to shade 5 of them. Oh wow, that's almost the entire bar model. So I know that 5/6 is actually closer to 1. Well, 0 we know is far smaller than 1, so that means that 1/4 is less than 5/6. For a less than sign, at the very top, we're going to write our comparison sign, showing that the alligator's mouth is opening up to a bigger fraction, which is 5/6. So 1/4 is less than 5/6. Let's move on to the next one. So 1b, 7/8 and 3/6. Well, just like last time, 5/6 was closer to 1 because it was just one part away. 7/8 is only one part away from 8/8. So I know 7/8 is closer to 1. 3/6, oh, 3 is half of 6. So I actually know that 3/6 is exactly 1/2. So 3/6 is closer to 1/2. 1 is bigger than 1/2. So 7/8 is greater than 3/6. We're going to use our sign to show that 7/8 is bigger than 3/6 by having our comparison sign open up to the bigger fraction. And now let's move on. Guided Learning 1 Part C, you do need to turn the page for this one. 1/5 and 3/8. This is a little bit harder. So I'm going to draw out 1/5 again. I'm going to split it up to 5 equal parts. And I'm going to shade one of them. Well, I know that halfway would be about here, right in between these two parts. So I know that 1/5 is actually closer to 0. 3/8, let's see. Split up into 8 equal parts. Now we're going to shade 3 of them. Let's see where my halfway point would be. See that right here. Right after the 4 parts, so there'd be 4 parts on the left and 4 parts on the right. That's only one part away from being 1/2. So I know that 3/8 is closer to 1/2. Let's see, 1/2 is greater than 0, so that means that 3/8 is going to be greater. So 1/5 is less than 3/8. I'm going to put my sign in at the top to show that 3/8 is bigger. The alligator always opens up to the bigger fraction. And now let's move on to the last one for part D. This one doesn't have all those little parts that we have to fill in. We just have to use our knowledge from parts A through C to help us with D. 1/3 and 2/3. Well, let's see. If I wanted to draw these out, I have 1/3 split into 3 parts, and I'm going to shade one of them. 2/3 broken up into 3 parts, and I'm going to shade 2 of them. Oh wow, 2/3 is definitely bigger. And something else I noticed is the denominators are the same. So now we just have to look at the numerator since the denominators are the same. The numerators say that the first one only has one part being shaded, but the second fraction has two parts being shaded. So when the denominators are the same, we just have to look at the numerator. 2 is larger than 1, so that means that 2/3 is greater than 1/3, just like we showed in our visual. Let's move on to guided learning D. Not guided learning D, guided learning part 2. Let's see, we're going to do A and B at the same time. The directions say to compare the decimals below to the fractions. It tells us to do 2 steps. First step is to rewrite the decimal as a fraction, and the second step is to use those benchmark fractions, which are 0, 1/2, and 1, to compare the fractions. So for A, we have 5/10 and 9/10. Well, it says to rewrite the decimal as a fraction. So I know that 5 is in the tenths place, so I can rewrite 5/10 is 5/10. And 9/10 is 9/10. Remember, the denominator here is the same, just like it was on part D for guided learning 1. So we just have to look at the numerator to determine which one is bigger. Well, 9 is greater than 5, so that means that 9/10 is greater than 5/10. Let's move on to part B, 92 hundredths compared to 45 hundredths. Let's see, 92 hundredths I can write as 92 over 100, and 45 hundredths is already written as a fraction. Oh, it looks like once again that the denominators, which is the number on the bottom, is the same. That's telling us the total number of pieces. So we just have to look at the numerator, which is the top number, which tells us how many parts are shaded or how many parts are taken. So 92 is actually bigger than 45. So 92 hundredths is bigger than 45 hundredths. Let's move on to part C and part D. 52 hundredths and 800. 800. So we have 52 hundredths already written as a fraction. And now we have 8 hundredths. I'm thinking the 8 is in the hundredths place. So I know my denominator is here, 100. And now I'm going to put an 8 in the numerator. Oh, wow. Even though the 8 might be bigger than the 5, 52 hundredths is actually bigger than 8 hundredths. So I'm going to have my alligator's mouth open up to 52 over 100. Last one, 6 over 100, and then 8/10. Oh, let's see, 8/10 is written like this, 8 over 10, but I can actually rewrite this as hundredths. So I have my hundredths here. We know that 8/10 was the same as 80 hundredths when we were talking about decimals. So this is the same as 80, and it looks like a 6. 80 hundredths. Remember, these space over here, even though there's nothing in it in the hundredths place, that means there's 0 hundredths, so we can always put a 0 there. 8/10 is the same as 80 hundredths. So 6 hundredths compared to 80 hundredths, oh, well, 80 hundredths is definitely bigger.